Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are going to be going over Unit 3, Lesson number 3, which is all about age structure diagrams. So far we've been talking about population ecology, and the population ecology we've talked about so far really applies to any organism and any ecosystem. Today we are going to shift our focus to human population. So this is going to be what is very interesting because it applies to us on a species level and is unique to us as a species. So what we're going to look at today is something called age structure diagrams. They are also known as population pyramids, so you can see them both ways. So just keep that in mind. Age structure diagram and population pyramid, those two words are interchangeable, and I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I don't really pay attention to which phrase that I use. Sometimes I say population pyramid, sometimes I say age structure diagram. It just depends on the mood. So we can go ahead and get it in our minds now that they're the same thing. Okay, so what is a population pyramid or age structure diagram? It basically just shows us the age and the sex structure of a country or a given area. We will focus specifically on countries, and there are certain things that we can gather from these pyramids. So if we just take a look at it here, we have the breakdown in percentages. Now on the bottom you can see the percentages, or you can see the actual number of people. There is an activity that I always do in class where I have my students calculate the percentages and then they have to build these pyramids. It's a lot and so it's not going to be what we do virtually just because it would take a long time to calculate those, and then normally there's like coloring involved. So we're going to do another virtual assignment, but basically you can either see percentages on the bottom or you can see total number of population. And we do have a division here. So it says usually but not always in percent to make for easier comparison. So just pay attention if you're ever looking at one to make sure whether there's percentage of the total population on the bottom or its actual number population. So the population is in 5-year age bands. So what that means is each tick mark on the pyramid will cover 5 years. So it starts from 0 to 4, and then it goes in 5-year increments until you get to 85. And then once you go over 85, because there are so few in populations that really live to be past 85, you just group them all together and you put them in one cohort. So males are on the left-hand side and females on the right. So, sorry, I feel like I went through this a little bit too quickly. So what this is showing us is just the breakdown between sex and age of a population. So like if we look here, and then the percentages should all add up to be 100, right? Because in this pyramid we have 100% of the population. So here we have 4% of the population are females between the ages of 0 and 4. Okay, this would maybe be 4.25. So 4.25% of the population are females ages 5 to 9, and so on and so forth. Over here, it looks like a little bit over 4, so we would say 4.25% of the population are males aged 0 to 4. So it just gives you the breakdown, and again, all the different bars should add up to be 100% of your population. So we can tell things about our countries based on the shape of the pyramids. So we'll talk a little bit more about developed versus developing countries when we talk about demographic transition in the future. But basically what we have is if we have more of like a well-rounded pyramid or age structure diagram, this is going to be a more developed country. So like the United States would be economically developed, and so this structure diagram is going to be a little bit more symmetrical. More or less developed countries, so countries that, are third world countries, they don't have booming economies, they're just getting started. They have kind of weirder pyramids. They can have some really weird dips, or they can also have very wide bases, and we'll talk about what that means. So here, so when we see the red, the slope of the pyramid will indicate our death rate. So our death rate is just how many individuals in the population are dying. The width of the base is related to the birth rate and the fertility rate, because remember on the bottom we have our youngest ages. So the wider the base, the more babies we have. In the orange here, we have proportions of men and women. So if we look at on either side, if we have more men than we do women, there's typically an explanation for that. And it's typically going to be some kind of like social reason, or maybe there's an event like during the world wars, men went to war and they died in larger proportions than women. So you might see more women than you did men, but typically there's some kind of either like war event or natural disaster or some kind of social reason we see that. And then in pink, the height of the graph will indicate life expectancy. So obviously at the very top is if we have individuals up at the top, this would be how long people in that country would be expected to live. And then in the purple, kinks will indicate a dramatic reduction in birth rate or increases in the death rate in the past. Again, this could be things like war, famine, something, dramatic that has happened in the country. And then the area of the graph will indicate the total population. So you compare the areas of different population age groups or different sexes on one graph. So the area here would be the percentage of females in the country, and then on the other side we would have the percentage of males in the country. And then the overall shape will kind of just give us some information about what's happening in our country based on the population. So let's talk about the difference and actually look at some visual examples of this. So here is a diagram of a developing nation, and this is Nigeria. So this will be a developing nation, and developing nations tend to have very wide bases and very narrow tops. So if we look at a developing country, they will have the very typical pyramid shape. When we think about a pyramid, they've got big bases and then they narrow to the top. The reason for this is that basically, people have in, developing countries, they don't really have access to birth control. Women don't have access to education, and so they basically get married very young and they have lots of children. So in developing nations, we will see very rapid population growth. Also, as they develop and are, getting their economy up and running, people are, able to get married and have children. But then also because they don't have access to healthcare, like modernized healthcare like we do, they have less and less individuals that live to be older. So that's why the top of their pyramid is narrow. So future resources needs predicted by a broad-based pyramid. So again, in a developing country, you would predict that you would need increased food production because the growth rate is growing or the population rate is growing. You would need to build more homes and schools. You would need more job opportunities for the young people in the future. And then also maybe think about implementing birth control programs and campaigns because, large population booms, like in developing countries, can be a strain on countries economically. And then here is a age structure diagram of a developed nation. So it looks very different. So this is Sweden. This is a first world country. They have a established economy. Women have access to education and healthcare and family planning. So what we see is that this population is not growing. So we don't have really an increasing population rate here because we're not seeing as many children being born. And what we're seeing is more and more individuals actually living to be older. So we even have a 95 plus range here in this particular pyramid. So women are having less babies. They're choosing to wait until longer to have children. And then they're having less children because they can choose, because they have access to birth control. And then modernized healthcare allow these individuals to live longer as well. So a narrow-based structure means the birth rate and the death rate are low. So a country may need to work out incentives to encourage more births. begin hiring foreign labor, and ensuring proper medical services and health care for the aged. Now, the issue with this is if you have a developed nation and you have a declining population rate or a birth rate, basically there's not enough young people to take care of the old people. This is an issue with Social Security because basically right now, like if you have a job, I have a job, obviously, we have taxes taken out to pay for Social Security. The Social Security, the taxes that we pay now, pay for the older individuals' checks. So, like, the idea is that you pay into Social Security now. Your money now takes care of the old people. And then when you get old, the young people should be paying into Social Security and paying for your Social Security. So you're supposed to get out what you put in. But the problem is with declining populations, there's not going to be enough people to support that. So that is a social program that will definitely have to be reevaluated as we go on. Oops, sorry. So pyramids, depending on their shapes, can tell us different things about a country, and we just need to be aware of this. We're going to do some analysis on some of these today, and you can use this as a reference. But a typical pyramid shape would show rapid population growth. So examples of this would be like Guatemala, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia. More of a pyramid shape, but still not quite a huge wide base, would show slow growth. So things like the United States, Australia, Canada, again, this would be a developed nation. Zero growth, basically zero growth, the bottom looks like basically line in line with the middle. So you don't really see a distinction between the percentages on the bottom, so the pre-productive age and then the mid-productive age. So this would be things like Spain, Austria, and Greece. And then negative growth is almost an inverted pyramid. So you have a wider top and then a slimmer bottom. This is things like Germany, Bulgaria, Sweden, also Japan. Japan has a declining population growth, and this is where you get those issues with like elderly care and having enough of a population to take care of older people. So this triangle would be a developing nation, and then these pyramids on the right-hand side would be indicative of a developed nation. And here's just some more examples. This is the population in 1900, 2000, and then projected in 2050. So we can see how we have gone from that rapid population boom moving into 2000. We were, more stable, less population growth, and then we will continue with that trend over time. So really quickly, the last thing we're going to do today is talk about China. China is very densely populated. So if we look at the pyramid, we do have a good amount of younger people, but also a fair amount of middle-aged people as well. So China is not a very large country, but in terms of how many people live there, it is very populous, and it causes things like infrastructure issues. There's a strain on healthcare. It's too many people in one place. So the government in 1979 proposed this planned birth policy known as the one-child policy. So they encourage this later, longer, fewer. So wait until having children once you get married, space out between the births, and then also have fewer children. They really just harp on this only have one child. So there's like this propaganda in China. It's like, oh, you'll be so much happier if you only have one kid. One kid is all you need. And this is just an effort in order to reduce the population size. But again, this kind of lends itself into some unforeseen consequences. One of the consequences of this is, and I think it's 2 children now, what they did was they implemented a tax, so you could be more like heavily taxed if you had more than one child. And I think it's 2 children now. I'd have to check on that to double check. But you just have some really unintended consequences. In China, it's a patriarchal community. There's emphasis on, the male's last name. And so what was happening was people, if they would have a daughter that couldn't carry on the family name, they would give her up for adoption. Or in some extreme cases, we were seeing, murders of these baby girls because people wanted a boy. And so that is an unintended consequence and a very negative consequence of issues like this. But in practice, at the same time, you do have to come up with a way, an incentive to reduce this population because China is maxed out. And then here's just an example of the population pyramid of China.